I was originally from Pittsburgh, and I didn't know what traffic was until I moved to Washington, D.C. And in moving to Washington, D.C., I soon learned I really missed Pittsburgh because it had no traffic compared to Washington. So I think Philadelphia is not that much different from Washington, and I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to catch trains, planes, get in automobiles, move along. That by no means we're going to do anything other than a spectacular panel. Now, I think you can see I have invited a few people, just a few. And it's been my experience through life, and I had a different life prior to ACS, that it looks a little bit like a board. And a board can sometimes be a little bit cantankerous, offer things you want to hear, offer things you don't want to hear. Sometimes panelists or board members may challenge other board members who are also sitting as panelists. So we're going to see how this goes. It's an interesting dynamic. I do have to tell you, and I think you know, I'm a Western Pennsylvania boy, and fireworks are very, very special in Western Pennsylvania. We have that famous family, you know who they are, the Zambellis, and they do a great job. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of fireworks here, maybe. But I really wanted to make sure that you were hearing the perspectives of as many people as possible to the commercial pathway. As many opinions and as many pieces and bits of information you could gain. And I think this is going to be a little introspective. Now we have to have a little bit of ground rules. First of all, Ray Stewart and I are the only lawyers here, I think, so we are off limits relative to complaints. That's too low on the hanging fruit, okay? So challenges can often go to complaints, and because lawyers are easy pickings, they're off limits, all right? Ray, I thought you and I would enjoy that.
Do we have to agree to that?
Yes, please. Okay, so next,
can we take a vote?
What I'd like to do is, you know, some of these folks, they've already given bios, some that you don't. And I'd like to have the ones that have not offered their bios to take a few minutes and talk about their bios first, and then what I call wing it a little bit, just let it go, wing it, and tell us, basically, what is it that entrepreneurs, you, our audience, pretending you're the entrepreneur listening to your board, what is it that you could do better? How could you be more successful? And a corollary question to that is, what kind of help would you need then to be better able to succeed? All right, so I have to pick on Ed first. Ed, I'm picking on Ed Olano. Edward Olano is president and CEO of Molecular Targets. He's actually the founder, a co-founder.
Co-founder, correct.
All right, so Ed, you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And this is a little bit of a bloodletting for you, isn't it? You're going to say a little bit about what you think other entrepreneurs should do and make sure you include yourself in what you think you should be able to do. So we're going to be a little bit more patient and lenient with him because he's going to be talking about things that might be near and dear to your heart.
Correct.
So Ed, could you take a few minutes, introduce yourself,
okay.
and then talk a little bit about what do you think you could be doing better and your fellow entrepreneurs could be doing better, and maybe who you could get some help from that might be at this table.
Okay, great. My name is Edward Olano. I did my undergraduate at UC San Diego in physical chemistry and then went to grad school at University of Texas in combustion chemistry. After Texas, went back to California, worked at Lawrence Livermore Lab for a year, got laid off and started Molecular Targets. Briefly, we're a startup nanotechnology company based in Irvine. One of the things that I've learned in the last 2.5 years, 3 years I've been doing this is that our technology is strong. You know, every time we go against, pitch against angels, there's nothing wrong with our technology. They've done some due diligence on that. But as an entrepreneur, I've learned to define my market. You know, a lot of the talks we've heard yesterday and today talk about market analysis, market assessment. I think every entrepreneur should know what their market is, who their competitors are, and what distinguishes them from their competitors. What's your unique, novel trait that makes you compete against those competitors? We're learning that a lot right now, and I think we've defined our market, and we're a lot more competitive than we've ever been. But I think that's the most important thing I would tell an entrepreneur. Yeah, your technology is great. What's your market? How are you going to sell your gadgets or your units? And how are you going to make money?
All right, thank you, Ed, very much. To his left is Bill Armiger. Bill, you're going to help us understand from the biotech's perspective what entrepreneurs could do better. And Bill, you're new to us, so please take a few minutes to introduce yourself.
All right. Well, one of my current activities is I'm the executive director of a new organization that's an affiliate of SOCMA, a Washington-based advocacy group for the chemical industry, called the Society for Commercial Development of Industrial Biotechnology. And we are working with companies in all stages of development along the value chain to assist in creating an environment and knowledge to be shared, and in how one goes through, or how companies go through the commercial development process, how you learn from organizations along the value chain, who are your customers, and what are the needs that a company is really trying to provide. Over my career, my background is I have a degree in chemical engineering from Princeton and a PhD in chemical and biochemical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. And I've been a serial entrepreneur. I still am, as well as doing the work with with SCDI Bio. And I would say that from the discussions that we've had today, I think one of the things that people really need to consider when you look at ultimately what your exit strategy is going to be, I think very early on, you need to look at what you're doing and try to see whether, is this an idea that really can be a standalone company or a very valuable business, or do you have something that is an improvement and is a good idea, but it's not really going to be a business. Maybe it's a single product, or it's a component of something, but it has a lot of value to companies that are part of the value chain. And as an entrepreneur, can you bring your technology up to a point that you can then partner that and get that into the commercial arena? And I think when you look at that, that starts to have implications about how you do financing, because we all have to start with first our own money. If we don't put our own money into it, have skin in the game, it's really hard to convince others to come along. You get your friends and family, but then at that point, you need to look at, am I going to go the angel route, which might allow me to do a partnership with a strategic investor, or do I have something that really is a big hit and I want to go the venture capital route? But I think those kinds of strategic decisions very early on are important. And I think in order to help you answer those kinds of questions, you need to to pose that opportunity to a number of different people and get reactions to it as you go. I think the other thing we've learned today is if you're going to fail, fail early, and then get on to something else. Or, as Charlie said in the last thing, when somebody tells you you can't do something, that really can be motivation that, by gosh, I'm going to show them that, that they're wrong. But I think you want to make sure that in doing that you're not violating the laws of thermodynamics, you're not trying to do something that, that really isn't possible. So those are my
Thank you.
takes.
Thank you. We're very pleased to have Dr. Victor McCrary here with us, and he represents the university perspective. I think we all know and we all recognize the valuable benefits of the academic community and the universities being now more economic engines than they've ever been before. So I invited Victor here to give that perspective, that economic development, that regional economic development engine perspective to you as an entrepreneur, and offer some advice as how you might better help them succeed.
Sure, Ken, thank you. Glad to be here. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Catholic University, a PhD in physical chemistry from Howard University, and then for 10 years after I got out of my PhD, I worked at Bell Laboratories. Toward the end of my career there, it was about 10 years, they took a bunch of us and they said, we're making all this innovation, but we're not knowing how to monetize it, and we think that the people that we have here don't have the skills. So they sent a few of us back to school. So I have an executive master's in technology management from the Wharton School and the School of Engineering here at UPenn. And then after that, in my career, mostly what I have been doing is investing internally in technology and developing technologies for large organizations. So after Bell Labs, I worked for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, and for 3 months now, I've been on this job here at Morgan State University. And one of the things I encounter a lot from entrepreneurs, in this case faculty entrepreneurs, or people who want to work with the university to take their ideas forward, I think what's keeping them successful, from being successful, is fear. I have a lot of faculty members who come up in the conversation and go, Dr. McCrary, I have this great idea. Oh, good, tell me what it is. Well, I'm not sure if I want to tell you because you might steal it. So, and that's one of the things I try to tell them is, you've got to at least trust somebody, and also you've got to trust yourself if you have an idea. And I can say that from my own experience, because when I was at NIST, my boss at the time said, okay, I've given you a lot of money to develop technologies with some of your folks here. Do you have any ideas? And we all went around, and I said, you know, I've been thinking about this thing for 5 years. It was 1996. I got this thing called an electronic book on my mind. And he looked at me and he said, you really want to do that? And I said, I'll bet my paycheck on it. So if you put my name in Google and put up electronic book, the rest is history. I will tell you, just go ahead and do those type of things. The advice I would give is, when we interface with faculty, or we even have business folks who want to come up and work with the university, the best advice I would give to them is to be aware that the university is a great resource, but you're not going to get rich tomorrow with it. A lot of folks come and want to work with the university. And the other thing I ask is to be patient when you want to work with the university. Many of the universities, particularly state universities, have very archaic policies and procedures. And even though I'm ready to do it, and we're ready to do the deal, and we're ready to collaborate, we have to go through a two-word thing and you promised we said we wouldn't talk about it, but it's called University Council, okay? And
there we go already.
and those
Ray, I tried.
And those things take a little time, but people are moving forward with it. And also, faculty members tend not to understand the business cycle, so you have to take time with them. And if there are any faculty members out here who are also thinking about being entrepreneurs, I would also say start walking across the quad to the School of Business or economics or any of those other people, because in my school, as when I was in Hopkins, most schools are very siloed. But the knowledge is there. You can find some people, you might get the leads. I think one thing that I heard today from everybody is contacts, contacts, contacts. So if you can expand your network, even within the school, it would be a great help.
Thank you, Victor. Okay, so Jerry, you're new to our panel as well. Welcome. Here again, you're on the board. You represent and you have considerable business development and sales experience. You're talking to your entrepreneur CEO. You've been invited. You've had a nice lunch. They didn't give you any money, but that's okay too. You're making good contacts. What is it that you think is keeping entrepreneurs from being more successful?
I think to keep it simple, I think it's very clear that everybody wants to turn the world on fire overnight. And I think the key thing is really, focus on your priorities. There should be no more than 2 or 3. Really stay focused and stay with that game plan, but at the same time, clearly have a plan B. I think the unique thing, being an entrepreneur and not being part of a larger organization, you have the ability to be flexible. And clearly having a plan B will give you that opportunity to leverage that position, whether that's a technology or a new product idea, and stay focused. In addition to that, the other key thing is certainly from the standpoint of developing your business plan, even if it's in the early stages, is to really see it through execution. I think this has come up in a number of different discussions over the last couple of days, but I mean, we've seen great ideas that have come forward, but unfortunately the execution was poor and they failed. And that's happened certainly within small companies as well as large, but more so on the entrepreneurial side. Make certain that you have a solid execution plan, and that's key, as well as the great idea.
All right, I think that's pretty sage advice to me. To his immediate left, and my dear friend, Raymond Stewart, also colleague at the bar, and that's the bar Association, not necessarily the bar.
It's both.
Is it both? I guess it's reduced to that after this. Okay, so it will be both. Ray, here you are. You're a lawyer, you're counsel to this, this board that we have collected. Entrepreneurs are looking for your advice. They want to be more successful. I'm sure you have a few things you'd like to offer. You have not had, well, you did have an opportunity to talk to us earlier. If you'd like to give a little more of your bio, please do so. But really, our folks need to know a little bit more about how to succeed and what kind of legal risks they need to be thinking about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I'm a partner at a law firm in Washington called Thompson, Coburn, and my background is tax, finance, corporate business, transactional. My law firm is a full-service firm, so it provides IP, trade, litigation, everything else. But I deal a lot with entrepreneurs, a lot with startup companies. And I'm going to tell you a real story. This really happened last Wednesday morning. I met with this new client in my office, senior scientist at NIH, mid-40s, brilliant guy, Stanford, PhD. He said, I need to talk to you. And I go, okay, what's the deal? He goes, well, the good news is that my partner and I have been approached by a strategic buyer, and they want to buy this IT company that we basically threw together back in 1997. And I go, well, that sounds like good news. He goes, yeah, they're basically putting they put an LOI, a letter of intent, on the table for $30 million. And he said, what's amazing is that when my roommate and I from Stanford put this together in '97, we just kind of threw it together. We didn't think much about it, and it has grown crazy. And you know, he kind of I kind of gave him the opportunity to manage it and put the marketing and distribution, all that together. And I've been working on the IP. And so it's great. And I said, okay, well, why are you here? And he goes, well, my partner now tells me that he wants 75% of the deal. And I said, well, I thought you were 50-50 partners. And he said, well, yeah, that was kind of the handshake. I think we used that term yesterday. I think Sadiq used handshake. So then I started smiling when I hear that. So I go, well, what does the operating agreement say? He goes, you know, I don't know if we signed it. I don't even know if we had an operating agreement. Okay, well, who owns the IP? Well, I think we filed a patent for this stuff. And we did form a company, but I don't think we had an operating agreement, and I'm not sure we assigned the IP to the company. I don't know. And then there's been a lot of other folks that have been involved in it. What do you mean? Well, we raised some money. We raised $1 million about 10 years ago. I go, oh, really? Okay. So are they owners? Well, we haven't really told them yet. Well, do you have subscription agreements or any evidence of it? Well, we just raised the money. I said, okay, so you had no subscription agreements. You didn't do any federal filings, security filings, no blue sky filings? No, but we saved a lot of legal fees back then. so I guess my message would be is in the beginning is the time when you've got this love fest going. Everyone's happy, everyone loves each other. Now's the time to sit down and knock out written agreements. Make sure you've got the patents. Make sure you've got the proper owner of the patents. Make sure if there are any employment agreements, get them executed. Operating agreements, get them executed. So in short, from my perspective, from a kind of a business corporate law perspective, it's just get that boring housekeeping documentation done, because this guy now has to deal, and I had to step away yesterday afternoon because of an hour conversation with the other guy's lawyer, and we just kind of shook our heads and said, well, I don't know how this happened. Of course, he's not claiming anything, but that would be my message, is just make sure that up front you get all the documentation taken care of.
Sage advice. I probably know a whole bunch of lawyers that would like to represent them in the lawsuits against each other.
Yeah, that's right. Well, since there were none, I guess there's no one to go at.
And mind you, we're not obstructionists. To Ray's left is Dr. Avi Spier. We've heard from Avi already with a fabulous discussion about the deal aspects relative to Big Pharma and dealing possibly with Novartis. And Avi, you had touched on quite a few things during that conversation. And I promise you this is an opportunity for you to even delve in more to that if you'd like. But Avi, what is keeping entrepreneurs from being successful, and what would you suggest they do to do a better job?
Thank you. It was hard to follow Ray's comments. Clearly, one thing they could do more successfully.
Hard to follow an astronaut, actually.
Yeah, that's true. So, I'm actually going to keep it relatively simple, but I think, in real estate, they have this saying, location, location, location. From my point of view, from where I am now, it's, I would change that to, it's the science. It's all about the science, really. When we receive a pitch on technology, at Novartis, we don't care if there's spelling mistakes, we don't care if there's a glossy PowerPoint and a fancy brochure and 6 really experienced high-level management guys, or if it's one person from Bangalore with some reactions worked out and some terrific technology or wherever. It's really all about the science, and we'll quickly delve into whether the science is credible and worth evaluating. So it really is about the science, and it really has to be world leading. It can't just be the best that you can do, or the best that can be done in your state, or the best that can be done in your country. It actually has to be the best in the world, and definably and provably so. So I would sort of harp on my earlier comments and sort of talk about the level of validation that you can bring at the level of sort of financing or grant-based studies, SBIR awards, early stage angel funding, or even VC money, but basically to use that capital to really add to the proof of concept, so it becomes overwhelming that you really have technology that is the best available to the industry. And then back to my other comment earlier is about the competition. Know the competition. Know what you've got to be. Know what where the bar is. And I think Gabby's comment during his presentation was very illuminating to me about sort of running out of a building through the window and sort of not really knowing where you have to be. Is just kind of, it just really smacks to me of that. Is really you have to know what you have to prove, and then go out there and sort of march along the way to get there, because it doesn't matter that you're not there, but because then that just basically leads to sort of the deal size and valuation. But you have to be along the way, ticking off those boxes. And if you run out of money and we still believe in the technology, we can help finish that off if it makes sense to do so. So I think really knowing where the state of the art is and what you have to do to be the best. And I would just encourage people to access the most experienced people that they can in the field, talk to as many people as they can. And I think Victor made that comment, and it's extremely sage and salient, in that people are reticent to talk and give their ideas out. But there comes a point where you really do have to sort of discuss these ideas with people. And there are ways to do that without sort of going into compound structures, and you can also put people into CDAs to have discussions. They don't have to be expensive legal agreements. And then just some advice from when I was an entrepreneur. It really goes to Ray's comments. But my dad, who's also called Ray, when I was starting out my company, his pretty much often repeated and only advice was keep your eye on the ball, never take your eye off the ball. And even if you have great technology and a great team and financing, there are still just a myriad, thousands of ways that you can really sort of damage the ability of your company to proceed. So many holes you can fall down and problems that can come up. And if you aren't looking at every single aspect of the company and the progression as the entrepreneur and really owning the project and not sort of outsourcing responsibility for key aspects, or really keeping on top of it, I think is the main thing. Because if you have the really good technology, you really don't want any other issue than a technology risk to be why the company doesn't proceed.
Awesome advice, I have to say. Thank you, Avi. So I'm going to take a minute to thank Dr. William Provine to be with us today. Bill, you are new to our panel, and I'm delighted that he is here. It's very exciting to have the large chemical industry represented at the table. A little bit like biotech, I think the large innovator can be a little, or I'm sorry, like big pharma, I think the large innovator is a little bit of a black hole for us, a little bit of a wonderment, a little bit of a challenge to find out how we can work with them. And we're very fortunate to have Bill here with us. And Bill, if you would be so kind to tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, and that piece of sage advice you can offer that says, here's how you can be more successful with us.
Okay, perfect, yeah. Currently I'm Director for Science and Technology External Affairs with DuPont, so I'm a type of person who can help you out to understand a big complex company like a DuPont, whether it be locally or anywhere around the world. So having a conduit and an interface for folks to say, hey, I just need to connect with whom, and I can help make those connections happen. So that's an important feature with large companies, to look for those inroads and those conduits to help you find the right place to have the conversation. I've been with DuPont for 21 years now, and a little bit of a poster child for alternative career paths, I think. So a variety of things from manufacturing to marketing, new business development. I sit on a lot of advisory boards, both for small companies as well as the government, and really just getting all that information together and to help DuPont with those interfaces. So really to look, when we deal with entrepreneurs and small innovators as well as large innovators, the first thing I'd start with is really the trust in the relationship. When you come in and talk to the company like a DuPont, to be credible with what you're saying, credible from don't overstretch the truth. I think, you know, the difference between confidence and arrogance, right? It's great to be confident, it's not so good to be arrogant. And sometimes there's a fine line, and everybody has a different definition when you go over the cliff. So watch where that cliff might be depending on the company that you're talking to. Because that'll spin into, do we see you as an effective partner or collaborator, or do we see you with someone that maybe has delusions of grandeur? You know, that you really don't know what you have and what you don't have. And really looking at not only proving this what you have in its uniqueness, which of course coming to bear, we're going to look to say how can you make us special as well as how we can make you special. So where's that win-win partnership, but also to prove, hey, I know my value chain, I know where I fit in, I know my competition and the competitive landscape, and this is how I fit in, and this is where I need your help. To really come in with a game plan saying, hey, DuPont, you know, this is what I need, and I think you have it. Let's have a conversation. Here's what I can give you in return to make this great win-win relationship. And as you go down those conversations, and again, back to the trust factor, I mean, if you get to the point, we'll always do our due diligence. You know, we'll go in and trust people from the get-go, but the worst thing you do, of course, is to take that trust and get to the point of, well, it inevitably come out, you know, if you overstretch the truth, and then we'll find out, and then you're pretty much close the door for a long time to come. So I would just say, just be careful and credible, and know with the risks. We love taking risks, calculated risks, you know, but we don't take stupid risks. So know what your risks are, and have a game plan. Say, hey, I'm here and I aspire. We love people to say, I aspire to greatness. We aspire to greatness. The question, what's your step plan to get to that greatness, and how can we help you get there? And while you come in, you may have a very set perspective in your own mind what you want and what you want to be, but I also encourage you to be flexible. Sometimes people come in are very inflexible, either with their business model, how they want to collaborate, or what they want. A lot of people said you may not know the biggest win for your technology when you enter the door. It may morph, and keep your mind open to a variety of things. Doesn't mean you don't have to go there. It just definitely keep your mind open to alternatives, because things change as the conversations progress and more data is presented.
Thanks very much, Bill. Okay, so we have an old friend here in Dan Daly, and he and I have traded jabs over the last 2 days. And I wondered, Dan, if you would know why I had 9 panelists here. Well, I'll save him. That's as high as I can count. So Dan, you've heard Charlie talk about proof of concept and prototypes. You had to be salivating at that. What would you offer to entrepreneurs to help them be more successful from your perspective and a center that helps them to develop those prototypes?
And without any disparaging remarks about lawyers. Okay. Well, I think, and sitting next to an angel investor, I think that the proof of concept centers are too early for an investor, or that the invention is too early at that time. And so therefore, getting the funds to actually build these prototypes and to test them out is, does somewhat restrict the entrepreneur from progressing to that level so that he could prove to an angel investor that his company and the invention is worthwhile. So, so that pre-seed funding is probably a big barrier to entry. And also the management team, one thing that we really found that we lack at the university is a business development person who has expertise in a certain industry. Like for instance, in dealing with DuPont, if you want to sell or attract them as a potential joint development partner, you're going to have to know the business so that you can, and know who to contact and actually know that language. And that's not readily available to a university setting. And plus I might add the fact that I'm not able to pay them any money. It was just a little bit of an inhibition to them actually wanting to join. But one thing that we have had some success in is people who have been in an industry for a while and are contemplating retiring, and then would work for an equity share in something that right now is not worth anything. So.
Quite a challenge when it's not worth anything, right? Okay, and finally, last but not least, and I have to definitely give Steve the award for being the most valuable player here, contributing to 4 panels, most panels, I guess somewhat like a Oscar award, if you will. That's for sure. Steve has been giving us a great deal of good advice, and I'm challenging Steve to give more. So, and I don't think he's going to have a problem. So Steve, once again, what is it that is keeping these entrepreneurs from being more successful with money, being the money person on the panel, and what advice would you give?
Okay, so I see on a routine basis, I see entrepreneurs coming out of the university, postdocs, graduate students, faculty members who have an idea, they have access to a technology, and they want to do something with it. And I see them regularly jumping into this without really understanding what they're doing. Now I'm going to go back to the lawyers, and I'm going to tell you that the first thing you want to do is find a good corporate law guy. So what I recommend to entrepreneurs who have an idea, and there's something they're passionate about, and they're ready to invest their own money in it and all those things, but they're ready to go. The first thing you want to do is find a law firm or a lawyer who understands how to set up companies that are early stage type of entities. They will tell you, that a good person will tell you, look, in order to raise capital, you're going to have to be a C Corp, not an S Corp, not an LLC. Don't go through all those other entities, just become a C Corp. When you do that, you're basically setting yourself up with a good solid foundation. And a good corporate law person will tell you how to set up the company, how to authorize shares, how to deal with the shares. When you start selling shares, they'll help you figure out what your share valuation ought to be. You have to set up option pools and so forth. So there's a lot of very early stage steps that you need to make and achieve with a good corporate law person. Now, the next person you need to talk to is an IP lawyer. If your university has already sort of done the intellectual property work, you need to have your own lawyer who will help you figure out how to what's your intellectual property plan for the company and how to go forward. And then the third type of law that you need to worry about is transaction law. You need to have a lawyer involved who will help you raise money. They might be a person who's experienced in negotiating with your university or with universities and will help you figure out how to acquire the technology out of the university. But those three legal individuals in that order are extremely important for an early stage company. So, you know, I hate to bring it back to the lawyers, but it is in fact a very, very critical step. Now, one last thing I want to say, and they're not going to like this, but find a law firm who will give you service for free with a certain amount of deference of fees. Every firm that is any good at this and who wants to help startup companies will work for you for a period of time for nothing. You're going to owe them money, but they will give you this kind of service in order to engage with you and to get you started. And then as you start to raise money, then you can start paying the law firms back. Some firms charge exorbitant hourly rates, and what you want to do is find one that will either defer those exorbitant rates to a later time, or they'll give you a younger person within the firm who doesn't charge the exorbitant rates but brings the firm's key advice to the table for you. So there's lots of ways to work with the lawyers, but you have to have a good law team around you at the very, very early stage of your entity.
So I think, Ray, that was a little bit of the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
I like the first part of it.
The giveth? So Ray, how, please, if you would be so kind, maybe you'd like to comment on that a little bit. I think Steve made some very good points. And your example was spot on as to the mess that can be made when you have poor planning. I think we have a special role, the possibility of being a obstructionist, but we can also have that possibility of being a proactive advocate for the process. So would you like to take a few minutes, please, and maybe add to what Steve was talking about?
No, I think Steve was spot on. It's a tricky situation because entrepreneurs typically do not have wallets that are stuffed with cash, and it's very difficult. I think I mentioned a couple times over the last 2 days, it's a catch-22. Let's just focus on the IP for a moment. It's hard to raise capital without your IP being protected, right? But it's hard to protect your IP without the cash to protect it. So how do you, how do you get past that? So that is a tricky thing. Now, you've got a number of law firms, especially at West Coast, Silicon Valley type law firms that have gone so far as to take equity participation in the deals, right? And so there are some law firms that have ridden up, and it's kind of like the angel funds. If you can hit 1 out of 10 of these, that's a great. If you can hit Google, that's great. You can absorb a lot of other hits. Having said that, law firms are still stuck in this hourly fee, this hourly rate thing, right? But I do believe that there's flexibility in a number of firms, including ours, where we can try to get you started in the right direction. And in fact, we are one of these preferred professionals, I guess, within the Entrepreneur Institute of ACS, and as part of that, we made a commitment that we would offer some time up front to sit down with you and cover just the most basic things, and we will volunteer our time for that. And then that gives us an opportunity to kind of scope it out, and like anything else, as an investor or anyone else, you have to kind of say, well, what's the likelihood of success here? And just as an investor, we are investing, right? So we have to judge the management, we have to judge the technology or the idea, and we have to see what's the likelihood of there being some kind of liquidation event, which is in the form of raising capital or ultimately. And so obviously, You know, we've come up with some ways where we might be able to defer a portion of it. We, just like I think others have said, you got to have skin in the game. We're not going to defer 100% of it. You got to have some skin in the game. So maybe we defer a half of it, and then we back end it. Maybe we put a little incentive on it for us to ride with you. So maybe it's a, you know, you pay 50% now, and then you pay another 100% when you're successful. And if you're not successful, then we have to write off 50%. So there's some flexibility in all that, and I do. But you have to go through the same process as any investor goes through, and you know, we're going to be quizzing you on that. But I think the good thing is that we have committed to volunteer, I don't know, a couple hours anyway, to which is, you know, $1,000 an hour. That's $2,000 worth. No, just kidding, just kidding. So that, I think that helps. And also we do have a hierarchy of folks. And so to the extent that you can push work down, leverage down to a lower billing rate, that's helpful. The other thing, kind of a pitch from my law firm, is that we are headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. So we're a good Midwestern law firm. All of our overhead, all of our back offices is in Missouri. So that actually flows through to our billing rates. So I'm on K Street in Washington, D.C. I can guarantee you that the law firm right next to me is charging $200 more an hour for a partner at my level than we are, and that's an advantage. So I think we do have that advantage as well.
Good point. Good that we're beginning to think openly. Bill?
If I can make
yes,
a comment here.
Please.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to have good legal advice right from the beginning. From the companies that I've been involved with, we've always had the philosophy, we've worked with law firms that are well-known national firms, and they've taken a project or a company on because they've seen that there's an opportunity to develop a relationship that over time, the time that they invest will ultimately, you know, result in legal fees. But we've been very careful not to allow lawyers to take, or our lawyers, to take an equity position in the companies. Yeah, because really what we want is, when you need a lawyer is when the going gets rough, and I don't care what company you've had, you're going to have rough times, and you want to have legal advice that is not clouded by an equity interest in the business. And I think that's, you know, that's extremely important.
That's a great point. I think, Dan, you want to chime in too.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to make the opposite point. It's a roundtable. Yeah, what we found in the university setting, and actually, to my somewhat surprise, the class that I teach, new venture development at the university, well, I get, you know, of the 40-some students, I get 20 from the law school. And they're fairly entrepreneurial. And going back to Steve's comment, I think having someone, even though they are taking equity share, they're part-time owners of the company, they help develop the patent strategy, which I think is extremely important because, you know, as we talked about, and Steve touched on it, the Tech Transfer Office is going to license you the technology that was the original invention, but all the development work from henceforth, if you're not extremely careful as a young startup company, you know, who owns that and where does that reside? You don't want to continually have to be giving equity shares to the university for that IP. So having someone on your board or as a company owner working for equity or a part of his own company actually is beneficial as far as we're concerned.
So you raise another really good point, and Victor, I'd like to direct this to you, and you probably knew this was coming from the tech transfer perspective. I think there's a lot of frustration, and sometimes warranted and maybe sometimes unwarranted. We know tech transfer is a business center for universities. We hear about the possibility that they may be trying to align themselves a little bit better with the community. You're taking on a very new, unique position there at Morgan State, and you're trying to affect some change. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit of what you're trying to do in accomplishing this regional, good for the community kind of perspective, please.
You know, you have to be careful what you say at the bar at night because you might end up having to repeat it. At Morgan State, this position I'm in is actually a brand new position, so they've not had a vice president for research. But they've come to the point where they've got anywhere between $35 and $50 million worth of research that is coming, and it's starting to grow even more. So at some point, you've got to have a focus point because you have faculty bubbling over with ideas. But also the same frustration that you have in trying to set up a tech transfer. Morgan State has decided to also have a thing called the Morgan Community Mile, where they see the university as a catalyst for transforming the surrounding neighborhood in Northeast Baltimore. And actually, this idea came out of here in Philadelphia with the ideas of what University of Penn did about 15 years ago with the West Philadelphia neighborhood. That's also to bring both health, wellness, as well as economic vitality to the neighborhood. In doing what we were planning on doing, we also are going to start soliciting ideas from the neighborhood, okay? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs there. And I'll say something that's very unique, because it touches a lot of maybe people here, not necessarily chemists, but one hot area is cybersecurity. It touches everywhere. If you're running a chemical plant, you have to be worried about it. Obviously, if you're the Department of Defense, you're worried about it. If you're a financial institution, you're worried about it. What's very unique is we're setting up a cybersecurity center for diversity, because the people in the neighborhood, we know, probably are much better than the people at Cyber Command at Fort Meade. They have to work between the cracks in society. They represent a certain segment of society. And that diversity they bring and those skills are probably what you need for a very agile and changing threat. So now that's just cybersecurity, but there might be other innovations that are probably born out of necessity. Obviously, you know, don't forget the old saying that necessity is the mother of invention, and a lot of these folks have to come up with new ways, new apps and things just to live day to day. We hope to try to capture that and to make that part of the IP of the university, but also benefit the neighborhood. So besides getting tech transfer from our students and our faculty, we are definitely reaching out to the entire community that surrounds the university.
Thank you very much. I think that's a laudable direction. We heard yesterday, we heard from a very, very bad pitch. And during that pitch, we heard these awful numbers in marketing and sales. And Jerry, I'm going to pick on you for a second. We heard this, the Buffett word, B as in billion, and the total reachable market, and awful terms like that. And Bill just made the excellent point. Please be credible. Please be credible. You will have his ear if you can be credible. How can our entrepreneurs get a better understanding of building credible numbers looking into the marketplace that might reasonably suggest there's a market pull for that product and you don't have to necessarily do a lot of push? Could you comment?
Sure. No, actually, that point was raised in a couple different discussions over the last day or two, and I think ideally, if you can create a market pull approach versus a technology push, you're certainly in a much stronger position. But at the same time, you need to be credible. And I think clearly, when you think about this as well, number one, knowing the true value proposition of your product first and foremost versus competitive offerings is a key understanding, and also the technical fit into various markets. And there is certainly a groundwork that needs to be done to understand those markets. And even, you may have an opportunity of understanding a market, but then really how does your product fit within that market? Really digging down into the tangible, even though the accessible market may be $6 billion, but what portion of that market are you going to be able to really target with your product? And have that homework done in a very credible, laid out way that's believable. Because certainly when you're approaching individuals, whether you versus others going in with similar offerings, you want to be very credible, and that's something that they can check out very easily in the short term. And if that's found, quite early in the process that your numbers are telephone numbers versus reality, that's going to clearly come back on you, and your credibility for any other opportunity is going to be squashed. But really, it's the investment in understanding that market, whether you can do that yourself or through a third party. And again, a lot of times, being small, you may want to try to do some of that on your own, but don't, again, surround yourself with the right people that you can certainly afford to understand those markets so that you have a very credible proposition going forward.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm jumping around a little bit, and I'm going to ask Bill from DuPont. Bill, DuPont's a very big organization last time we checked, and sometimes it may be very difficult to learn about the strategic interests of DuPont. We've heard during the last 2 days, particularly in partnering, that it's not just enough to know our own game, we need to know what's very important to you. And if we're going to maximize success, we better do some homework on that. Bill, could you help us to learn more about ways that DuPont is helping to get the word out about what you are interested in, and or are there ways that you can suggest that are more effective than others in reaching through to you and those in your team to be able to get on your radar screen?
Yeah, good question. Well, one, first of all, is just finding information. The internet's a wonderful place, you know. So, and being a publicly traded company, which a lot of the larger innovators are, you know, investor presentations are there. They lay out our high-level strategic plan. It's really connecting in with that high-level storyline, and it's at least selling the concept to a place like DuPont. Yeah, it's a complex organization where a position like myself is positioned to try to help people make those connections, but you can find an internal champion almost any place. It's always good to have somebody who knows your technology space that can move forward and say, hey, I understand why you're special. And they can take that in, and then they can actually maybe tell the same story you told, but coming from someone internally, of course, it's going to have tenfold the impact than someone you have to say, well, what are they really trying to sell me, versus somebody who's, you know, has less, you know, skin in the game per se, but is evaluating your technology. So I think it's very easy to connect in with company. And again, become a good storyteller. You know, maybe it's an art that we lose in science sometimes in terms of communication. And I don't want to say tell story. I prefer nonfiction to fiction again. But, you know, really look at, you know, you got that 2 minutes in the elevator, we say in DuPont, you know, with your CEO, and you really want to pitch him an idea. You really have to figure out a way to adjust it down to the simplest parts where you not only tell what your strengths are, but how it does connect in with that other partner, with what they want. What does the other side need? And really crystallize it down to that 2-minute story where you really are, you can see the passion in your eyes, would be the first thing we look for, and you're telling that story that tells them what they need too. But really go to school on practicing and becoming that storyteller in the right way.
Very good, Bill. Thank you very much. I have one more question for Ed. And Ed is, it should be only fitting that it should be the last question goes for our entrepreneur before we take questions from the audience. So this came online, Ed. Wonderful, right? And they wanted to know, how are you doing in raising capital for your R&D?
Right now, we're in the middle of raising our first round. I'd say that we have so many irons in the fire that we should get something, a good result soon. It's been very challenging. You know, geographically, I'm in Southern California. I've been grateful to the Tech Coast Angels. One of our business consultants has helped us to get an attorney on board. Having an attorney is great. But the fact that we're a life science, physical science company, and the fact that when a potential investor looks at us, they think that we have to build a lab from scratch has been, I say, almost like a bad mark on us. A lot of people want a quick return. As a science company, you know, we have a very detailed financial pro forma. We can back up our data, but we're not going to have revenue for a few years. You know, and you know, a solid revenue. So it's been challenging talking to investors in that space. We're making some progress now, but for the first 18 months, we weren't making progress. We've been lucky to associate ourselves with San Diego Connect. They've been very helpful in the Springboard program. In terms of SBIRs, I brought that up yesterday. It's been very frustrating. We have about 6 SBIRs that are pending right now. We haven't heard back from anybody yet. And every time I talk to the program officer, I'm told another month or two. Right. So we're trying our best, you know, and we're also talking to a strategic partner in the Bay Area, a pharmaceutical company. They like our technology, but they want us to go into a different space. And like people have been saying here, we have to be very versatile and flexible enough that we can change our model such a way that we can fit the needs of who we want to partner with. And we're doing that right now. So we're doing that with our technology. So I'm confident we're going to get something soon. You know, we're writing as many grants as possible, but it is a very frustrating economy for a science company right now. I mean, I've talked to other science co-founders in the area of Southern California. They agree with me. But we're not giving up, and we've done our POC. We're now filing our patent, so we're protecting our IP. And thanks to the ACS, we're making more network connections right now, too.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'd like to throw it to the audience now for questions for our panel. And please do your best to identify who you'd like to direct it to. We have a few people up here.
Hi, thank you. So my question is to Mr. William Armiger. My name is Jayendra Bhosley Jay. I work for a small company, Asta Consultancy Inc. And you said that it's not a good idea to have legal part of your having a stake in the company. But what as it goes that in the beginning stage, all what you have is your intellectual property. What you have in your company is the value of the company. So I'm wondering, would you see a problem at this? Is that you do have a legal who does have stake in the company, but as you mentioned that when there are rough times, what you can do is have a second and third opinion from independent outside. So this way you have your own in-home legal help, but you also can double check it from outside help, which at that point you would have the ability to pay for that outside legal help. What would you say?
Well, I would say that, first of all, there are two kinds of legal help. One would be the general legal counsel for the company, the other intellectual property. Now, there are firms today that will do all of that for you, but there are also firms that just do patent law. And if you were working with a patent attorney, a patent law firm, there might be a way that you could work some. It's not as dangerous, I should say, doing it around the intellectual property prosecution than it is the general patent law, where you may have a shareholders dispute and you find that you're disputing with the law firm that's supposedly giving advice to the company as to how it's supposed to handle this. I think the other thing you run into is, okay, if you're going to offer equity, how are you going to value that? How much time is a law firm going to put in? I think it's much better to find out in the beginning how much money you need and work out some arrangements you're going to pay them this much now and this much later, and just not get into the equity part of it.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, I'm not quite sure who to direct this to, so maybe I'll let you handle this, Ken.
You direct it to the panel. Anyone willing to answer?
What headwinds do you see, macro trends for entrepreneurs? Do you think in the next 5, 10 years it's going to be easier or harder to start your own business, and what do you think is affecting that?
Excellent question. Who would like to address that? All right, Steve's going to take a wing at it.
Okay, so if you look in the past 10 years, there's been the capital markets have moved away from early stage companies, and so there's been less and less and less cash available to support startups. At the same time, there's a continual, actually an acceleration of technologies coming out. So there's a tremendous buildup of possible startups, but the cash hasn't been there. But actually the cash is there, it's just not being directed to early stage companies. So I was at the C21 meeting in Napa a year ago, and I heard for the first time there were 4 major VCs sitting up on a panel like this, and they were all talking about this very issue. And what I heard them say was that every one of those venture capital firms, these are the firms that only look at companies that normally are looking for $20 million or something like that. They've moved way away from this early stage opportunity. I heard them all say that they've now realized that there is great opportunities in the early stage companies, and they've split off sections of their firms to start looking back into this area. So my prediction is that there's a lot of good deals on the table right now in the early stage, and I think you're going to start seeing capital move back into those. So I would say over the next 5 years, you're going to see an uptick in investment in these early stage companies. Now, I tend to be a bit of an optimist about these things, but that's my prediction.
Avi, would you like to maybe take a crack at that from the pharma world, being that we're experiencing a little bit of a change in that industry?
Yeah, sure. I think speaking from Novartis, it's a little difficult because I think we're probably the outlier to that trend, in the sense that Novartis has reinforced its commitment to internal R&D and hasn't deprioritized external innovation access, but certainly is keeping it kind of steady state as it has been. But in the industry as a whole, I've seen a lot of pharma companies actually sort of downsizing their R&D efforts and putting more money into external innovation. So that means putting money into corporate venture firms, funding companies directly, working with academic centers, funding sort of putting money into research centers, I guess proof of concept centers, consortia. So, I mean, I think that is one of the big trends that's happening, and it may well be cyclical. Might come back that actually internal R&D is a bit more productive than external R&D, but I think that's currently we're in the sort of the full force of that change right now, and definitely money is flowing at a very great rate from the pharma industry to the external world, kind of at the expense of pharma company internal R&D jobs, and we'll see how that goes.
Thank you. Maybe time for just one more.
Hi, Melinda Toomey, Jayhawk Biotech. For those of you that have served on advisory boards, what are your minimum expectations, especially in today's economy, when it comes to compensation for serving on that board of a brand new baby company?
Who would like to address that? Steve?
So the typical number for an advisor on an advisory board is something on the order of 0.5% to 0.1% of the company's stock per year. That's for an advisory board. And then board of directors, it can be more like 1 to 2% per year. But that's generally the sort of thing that we see at TCA.
Okay, so please join me in giving a rounding applause for our wonderful panel. Thank you to you all. I greatly appreciate your insight. And before turning this over to Madeleine, I just want to thank all of the moderators, all of the panelists, all of the work that they have done, tireless in working with me to put the program together. It's been our pleasure to do that. I hope you've learned an awful lot in the process. I hope we're able to do this again. And I so do appreciate all of your time. I know how busy all of you are, but this is an important subject to help our colleagues to advance their businesses. So thank you again, and it's our pleasure to hold this event for you.
Hey, Eric. Yeah,